Dante Biasotti says, hey, CLCs, first time, long time. What gaming magazine did you grow up with and love the most? Do you miss the print medium? To me, there's something about the 24-hour news cycle that breaks some of the anticipation and excitement that came with breaking open a new EGM, Nintendo Power, OPM, or Game Informer. Hey, you can still get the print version of Game Informer, and it's pretty sweet. Like, it is fun to have that show up. And I hear what you're saying about like the 24-hour news cycle really bumming you out. Like, it's so nice to have that nice compact thing. Like, even, it's nice for us when we're talking about like, oh, what was the launch of the last generation like? And you can try and do like a Google limited time search to try and get a feel for the news stories, but just to be able to pick up like an old issue of Game Informer and see exactly like this was the talking point at that time is really interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. But I guess to their point, what was your favorite magazines growing up?
I was a pretty big Nintendo Power guy for a while. And then I think for a while I was reading Nintendo Power, Game Informer, and GamePro. Back when they did, I think it was like 2011, they did this relaunch where John Davison took over. Yeah. And they kind of like, they overhauled the design. They had it became a little bit more of a prestigious magazine. So I was reading all those three. But I definitely miss, even writing for a magazine, but even reading them. There is definitely a fatigue that comes in with every take being timely, and just like the idea of the most popular thing now online is just takes. Like, here's actually here's this like revelatory opinion on this game that is like what everyone is talking about. Versus, I think in a magazine you have the features that are less timely and more like, hey, here's like a deep dive on the history of this, or like here's something that is not necessarily like, here's what you should know this month, versus like, here's a wild story that happened, maybe a few years ago, or here's like chronicling how this design aspect works. I think those features still happen online, but they're always almost buried by whatever the talk of the day is, in a way that, unless it's like a super huge prominent thing where it's like, hey, by the way, here's how the history of like Naughty Dog, was, it kind of like their labor practices aren't great. Unless it's something like that, usually you don't have you don't see a lot of love for less timely features. And that's what I loved about writing for a magazine, is that I could take my time with features and do stuff that wasn't like, well, I got to come up with an opinion on whatever's going on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm with you. It is. I think that's where modern game magazines are strongest, is just zooming out a little bit, because, the time aspect and like the tense would always kill me when I would, because I was a video producer at Game Informer, so I rarely wrote anything for that magazine. I wasn't involved in proofing it or whatever you maniacs were doing all the time, sitting at your desks. So I would just get the magazine at my home and then open it up on a Sunday and read it, and it'd be like, coming up, here's a preview for this game. It's like, oh, that game came out yesterday. It's like having that weird disconnect always drove me insane. But growing up, did anybody else have a favorite gaming magazine?
I definitely would. Oh, gotcha. I was a huge Game Informer fan. That's why I became a Game Informer intern. So I still I really do like the medium. I've got a couple gaming magazines that I still subscribe to, and Game Informer still. And it is that thing of trying to keep all of this in your head and how fast the internet goes, to be able to sit down and read and say, oh yeah, this is the big thing that was happening. And then I remember very specifically, I guess probably a lot of interns claim to be Game Informer fans before they come in, because Jeff Cork did not believe me. Jeff Cork sat me down and I was like, I'm a big fan. I've been a big fan since 11 or 12, probably. And he was like, oh yeah, what was the first Game Informer that you ever had? And I was like, it was this, and it looked like this, and he shut down really fast. It was hilarious.
He fell on the floor. Oh, anime style, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Jill, I know you're a Game Informer fan, because I guess you pointed out the first time that I met you was at E3. I was walking the show floor at E3, which was it 2017, 2016?
2017 probably.
Okay, but it was the rare instance of somebody stopping me or yelling out like, "Pants it!" Because I remember I was looking at Skull and Bones. Remember that game?
I was in line for that game for 2 hours before I came to. So I was in front of the line. Like, there were a lot of stakes here to go meet you.
Yeah,
I was in front of the line. I'd been in there for 2 hours, and I saw your face. I'm like, "There's no way that I'm going to miss the opportunity to say hi to a Game Informer.
That's very sweet.
I almost lost my place in line, ran over, I'm like, I'm such a big fan, but I can't say anything, and I'm so sorry, I have to run away, and I ran back.
And I said, what was that confusing blur of a person? And then it turns out that eventually you're in the Game Informer office, so it all works out. So thank you for reaching out and saying hi.
Some of that, too, goes back to, if we can touch back a little bit on, like, the summer of gaming and all of the summer programming. Like, I really love E3. E3 was a big part of my life growing up as a gamer, and just I'm very happy to see that it's being transformed in some way. I hope it comes back, and I really the magic of being in a place where you can see the people that you really you grew up with and that you really admire. Like, there's magic in the air there that just isn't there for a digital space. So I do hope that it comes back in some way.
Yeah, that'd be nice for sure. Kyle, did you read a lot of gaming magazines growing up?
Oh, yeah, like obsessively. I was also a Nintendo Power kid. Like, that's what I read when I was really young.
Yeah.
But I did hit a point, probably like late elementary, middle school, I realized they weren't writing about the other systems, which like stood out to me as being like, wait a second. And then like, I read Game Informer pretty consistently starting around 2003, and really was a fan of Game Informer. But the one for me was always EGM. Obsessively read EGM, and I remember when I got the last issue, I remembered I was trying to explain to my wife like why it was such a bummer. Like, it wasn't just that something was ending that I liked, it was that like my career goal was to try to write for them. And it's not like I was confident that I would ever be able to. It was just that the option had now disappeared entirely.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it was like hard for me to explain why that was so upsetting for me. But yeah, EGM I really loved. And then Game Informer really genuinely was one that I read a lot and really liked too.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I had the same feeling with EGM, but a different route, because somehow, I don't know how, but I never read gaming magazines as a kid. I guess like none of my friends had them. And so instead I would just look at, pamphlets for Lego and read highlights and stuff like that, But I remember one time, seeing like a video game magazine in a store that had like a demo disc attached to it. So it's probably, PlayStation magazine or something like that. And I remember being obsessed with it and not getting it. And then we're on a big road trip with my family. And I remember freaking out in the car. I was very young about just like, please, we need to find one of those PlayStation demo discs. Because I lived out in the boondocks. And so like the idea of a video game magazine being on a shelf, it was nowhere in my hometown. Like, it was not a concept. So like, while we're traveling, I need to find one of these things, and I could not find one. It drove me insane. But then the connection then is, I was a big fan of video game websites like GameSpot growing up, and then 1UP blew my mind. I had the same thing too then when 1UP went down, of just like, oh man, I was hoping to work with now the Area 5 guys someday, on the video side. Now that they're gone, like, what am I going to do? There's no other options here in Minnesota. Oh, it turns out Game Informer, and then it all worked out. But Jeffem, do you read stuff? Was it just like Papyrus back then, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was Nintendo Power, and then EGM, and I also had Xbox Official Magazine, also for the demo discs, which was just such a cool idea, and it's sad that went away as everything came online anyway. But that always made it even more exciting to get an issue every month, because you also got a bunch of demos for games that you might want to get.
And I don't think Game Informer ever did the demos. I'm trying to remember the exact reasoning, but yeah, I'll write into the Game Informer show and ask about it, which we should mention, show some love to Game Informer. Like, we talk about it like it's past tense with gaming magazines, but they're still going over there and cranking out issues, and they could use some support right now. So go check them out and send some nice words their way.
Yeah, I got the new issue with Grounded. Is that the name
game
of it? And as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, Little People in Big World, Jeff Cork had to have written that cover story.
He did.
And I was so happy when I turned to it and saw that it was him.
It's very funny. On the Game Informer show, he was on it to talk about Grounded, and he talked about how into Little People in a Big World he is. And then within like 30 seconds, he's like, and I just want to be clear, this is not a sex thing. It is not connected to that. I am not into watching big ladies step on things. It is not connected. but methinks he dost protest too much.
That's right.
If you enjoyed this clip from the MinnMax Show podcast, we think you'll like the full show too. You can find it by subscribing to MinnMax's YouTube channel or on your favorite podcast app. Any help spreading the word to keep our whole indie operation here running is appreciated. We're here for and because of the wonderful MinnMax community, so you're welcome to join.